Now let's begin. Marshall Lambert pulled his truck into the Chevron station on Highway 47, the late afternoon sun beating down on the cracked asphalt. It was supposed to be Jill's weekend with Jenny. That's what the custody arrangement said. Fridays at 6 until Sunday at 7. He dropped his 7-year-old daughter off at her mother's apartment that morning, watching her small hand wave from the window before he drove away. The pump clicked rhythmically as fuel flowed. Marshall leaned against the warm metal of his truck bed, rubbing his eyes. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but the wound still felt fresh. 10 years of marriage dissolved because Jill couldn't handle his work schedule, couldn't understand why building the new water treatment facility meant late nights and weekend calls. She'd filed papers, moved in with her parents Cecil and Jean Donaldson, and taken Jenny with her. He'd fought for joint custody, won it too, despite Cecil's lawyer brother-in-law trying to paint Marshall as an absent father. The irony burned. Marshall had missed soccer games and dance recitals because he was designing infrastructure that would serve their town for the next 50 years, but that made him the bad guy. The pump shut off. Marshall replaced the nozzle and screwed on his gas cap, then headed inside to pay. The clerk, a teenage kid with acne and boredom written across his face, barely looked up as Marshall handed over his card. Walking back to his truck, Marshall's eyes caught on a silver Cadillac pulling out from the convenience store side. He'd know that car anywhere. Cecil Donaldson's pride and joy, a 2018 CT6 he waxed every Sunday and wouldn't let anyone else drive. Marshall's hand froze on his door handle. There, in the back window, pressed against the glass, was Jenny's purple jacket. The one with the yellow stars she'd begged him to buy her last Christmas. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Why would Jenny's jacket be in Cecil's car? She was supposed to be with Jill at the apartment. They had plans to go to the movies tonight. Jill had mentioned it during pickup, her voice clipped and formal like they were strangers. Marshall's engineering mind, trained to see patterns and problems, immediately began calculating scenarios. Maybe Jill needed something from her parents' house. Maybe Cecil was just returning the jacket Jenny left there. Simple explanations. But something felt wrong. Cecil was driving alone, and he was heading away from town, not toward the Donaldson house or Jill's apartment. Marshall didn't think. He got in his truck and followed. He kept 3 car lengths back, a trick he'd learned from his cousin Tommy Sanders, who'd been a private investigator before moving to Arizona. Cecil drove steadily, not speeding, not rushing. They passed the turnoff to Oak Street where the Donaldson house sat, past the road to Jill's apartment complex. Cecil kept going, out past the new development Marshall's firm had designed the utilities for, past the old Morrison farm, into the part of the county where properties sat on 5-acre lots and neighbors couldn't see into each other's windows. Marshall's mouth went dry. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. Cecil turned onto a gravel road. Marshall knew this area. He'd surveyed it 3 years ago for a project that never materialized. The old Hutchins warehouse sat at the end of this road, abandoned since the textile mill closed in '09. Nothing else out here except woods and forgotten buildings. Marshall cut his engine and coasted to a stop a quarter-mile back, pulling behind an overgrown hedge. He got out, pocketing his keys, and started walking. Gravel crunched under his work boots. The warehouse came into view. A massive concrete structure with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls, surrounded by waist-high grass and rusted chain-link fence. Cecil's Cadillac sat in the weed-choked parking lot. Marshall's pulse hammered in his ears. Every instinct screamed that something was catastrophically wrong. He moved quickly but carefully, using the tall grass as cover, approaching from the side of the building. A service door hung open, the lock broken years ago. He heard voices inside. Cecil's deep baritone, and then his blood turned to ice. Jenny's voice, high and frightened. "Grandpa, please, I want to go back to Mommy." "Hush now. You're going to sit still and be a good girl." Cecil's voice carried an edge Marshall had never heard before, something cold and commanding. "It hurts." I said hush. Marshall didn't remember moving. One moment he was at the door, the next he was inside the dim warehouse, his eyes adjusting to the shadows. He saw them in the corner, near what used to be the foreman's office. Cecil had Jenny by the arm, dragging her toward the door. Her purple jacket was torn. Her face was streaked with tears. But it was what he saw when Cecil shoved open the office door that made Marshall's vision go red. Inside, someone had set up a camera on a tripod. A mattress on the floor. Blankets. Cecil saw Marshall. For one frozen second, their eyes met. Cecil's face shifted through surprise to something dark and calculating. Marshall, this isn't what it looks like. Daddy. Jenny's scream cut through everything. Marshall charged. Cecil was a big man, 6'2" and 200 pounds of former high school football player gone soft around the middle. But Marshall had spent the last decade hauling equipment, climbing through construction sites, and his rage gave him strength that went beyond muscle. He hit Cecil like a freight train. They crashed into the concrete wall. Marshall heard something crack, Cecil's ribs, maybe his own hand. He didn't care. Cecil tried to swing back, but Marshall was already moving, driving his shoulder into the older man's gut, forcing him down. Jenny, run. Marshall shouted. Get in my truck. Now. His daughter didn't move. She stood frozen, eyes wide with terror, her small body trembling. Cecil bucked underneath him, managed to land a punch to Marshall's jaw that made stars explode across his vision. They grappled, rolling across the dirty concrete floor. Marshall's hand found a piece of rebar, rusted and sharp. He raised it high. Cecil's eyes went wide. Wait, Marshall, think about what you're doing. Marshall stopped. The rebar trembled in his hand. He wanted to bring it down, wanted to split this monster's skull open and paint the floor with his blood. But Jenny was watching. His little girl was seeing this. Daddy. Her voice was so small. He dropped the rebar. It clattered on the concrete. Come here, baby. Come to Daddy. Jenny ran to him. Marshall scooped her up with one arm while keeping his knee on Cecil's chest. She buried her face in his neck, her whole body shaking. He could feel her heartbeat, rabbit fast against his chest. Did he touch you? Marshall's voice came out strangled. Did he hurt you? He grabbed my hair. And my arm. It hurts. Marshall looked at Cecil pinned beneath him. The older man's face was already swelling, blood trickling from his nose. But his eyes held no remorse. Only calculation. You're making a mistake, Cecil wheezed. You assault me, you'll lose Jenny forever. I'll make sure of it. My brother-in-law Wallace Bean is the best lawyer in the county. You'll go to jail. For protecting my daughter from a pedophile? You don't have proof of anything. That camera. Cecil smiled through bloody teeth. Could belong to anyone. Homeless people use this place all the time. You're the one who attacked me. That's what the evidence will show. Marshall's vision blurred red again. His hand found the rebar. Marshall Lambert. Cecil's voice turned smooth, reasonable. Think. You've got your daughter back. Walk away. We'll forget this happened. You take Jenny. I'll tell Jill there was a misunderstanding. Everyone goes home safe. After what you were going to do. What was I going to do? I brought my granddaughter to show her the old warehouse where I used to work. She got scared, threw a tantrum. You showed up and attacked me like a maniac. That's the story, Marshall. That's what everyone will believe. Marshall wanted to kill him. God help him. He'd never wanted anything more in his life. But Cecil was right about one thing. If Marshall went to jail, what would happen to Jenny? He stood up, pulling his daughter close. Stepped back from Cecil. The older man rose slowly, wincing, one hand on his ribs. He straightened his shirt, wiped blood from his face, and smiled. Smart choice. Now, I'll take Jenny back to her mother. No. Marshall's voice was flat. Absolute. You'll never touch her again. You'll never be in the same room with her again. I'm taking her home, and I'm calling my lawyer. Cecil's smile widened. Do that. Call your lawyer. See where it gets you. You have no evidence, no proof. Just your word against mine. And I'm Cecil Donaldson. 35 years in commercial real estate. Deacon at First Baptist Church. City council member for 12 years. Who do you think they'll believe? He walked to the office door, reached in, and unplugged the camera. Tucked it under his arm. This? Never existed. That mattress? Homeless nest. You're delusional, Marshall. The stress of the divorce has made you paranoid. That's what my daughter will say. What everyone will say. Marshall held Jenny tighter. His daughter's fingers dug into his shoulders. Cecil walked past them, pausing at the warehouse door. You should have taken the deal. Now I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to take Jenny away from you permanently. And when I'm done, you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation once a month. He left. Marshall heard the Cadillac's engine start, the crunch of gravel as Cecil drove away. Marshall sank to his knees, still holding his daughter. His hands shook. His jaw ached where Cecil had hit him. But none of that mattered. Only Jenny mattered. It's okay, baby. You're safe. Daddy's got you. I don't want to see Grandpa anymore, Ginny whispered against his neck. You won't. I promise. You'll never have to see him again. He carried her to his truck, buckled her into the passenger seat, drove toward town with his mind racing. Cecil was right. Marshall had no evidence. The camera was gone. It would be Marshall's word against a pillar of the community. But as Marshall drove, his engineering mind began to work. Every structure had a weakness, a stress point where enough pressure would cause catastrophic failure. Cecil Donaldson was no different. He'd made a mistake today, revealed himself. And Marshall Lambert didn't lose. Not when it came to protecting his daughter. He wouldn't go to the police. Not yet. Because Cecil was right, they'd believe the deacon, the city council member, the respected businessman. But Marshall would find the evidence. He'd discover every secret, every weakness, every sin Cecil Donaldson had ever committed. And then he'd bring the whole structure crashing down. 3 hours later, Marshall sat in his living room while Ginny slept fitfully in her bedroom. He'd called his lawyer, Samuel Dugan, who'd taken his case in the divorce. Samuel had listened to everything, then delivered the bad news Marshall already expected. Without evidence, you're fighting uphill. Cecil can claim you attacked him. You admitted you did. That makes you look unstable. He had my daughter in an abandoned warehouse with a camera and a mattress, which you can't prove. He took the camera. The mattress could have been there for years. Marshall, I believe you. But belief doesn't win custody battles. Marshall closed his eyes. What do I do? Document everything. Keep Ginny with you tonight. Tomorrow, we file an emergency motion for full custody based on your concerns for her safety. We request immediate supervised visitation only for Jill until we can investigate. Jill. Marshall's stomach turned. Does she know what her father is? That's the question, isn't it? Samuel's voice was grim. Either she knows and she's complicit, or she doesn't know and she'll defend her father anyway. Either way, this is going to get ugly. After they hung up, Marshall sat in the dark, listening to his daughter's breathing from the other room. He'd tucked her in, read her 3 stories, stayed until she fell asleep. She'd made him promise 4 times that Grandpa wouldn't come get her. He'd promised. And Marshall Lambert kept his promises. His phone buzzed. A text from Jill. Where is Ginny? Dad said there was an incident. Call me now. Marshall stared at the message. Incident. That's what Cecil had called it. Not attempted child rape. Not attempted production of child pornography. An incident. He typed back. Ginny is safe with me. She'll stay with me. Your father is not allowed near her ever again. The response came immediately. What are you talking about? You can't keep her from me. It's my weekend. Ask your father what he was doing at the old Hutchins warehouse. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, you're insane. Dad was just showing Ginny where he used to work. You attacked him. He's at the hospital right now getting x-rays. I'm calling my lawyer. Marshall's jaw clenched. So that was the story. Cecil was already building his defense, playing the victim. Another text. Wallace is filing charges for assault. And we're going for full custody. You're mentally unstable. You can't be trusted with our daughter. Wallace Bean, Cecil's brother-in-law, the lawyer who'd tried to destroy Marshall during the divorce. Of course Cecil would use him. Marshall set his phone down. His knuckles were bruised and swelling from where he'd hit Cecil. Evidence of assault. His word against a city councilman's. But Marshall hadn't become a successful civil engineer by accepting defeat. He solved problems, found solutions, identified structural weaknesses, and corrected them. Cecil Donaldson had weaknesses. Marshall just needed to find them. He opened his laptop and started searching. Started with Cecil's commercial real estate business. Public records, property sales, business filings. Then moved to his position on the city council. Voting records, meeting minutes, contracts awarded. Everyone left a trail. Everyone made mistakes. Marshall had until Monday morning when Jill's lawyer would file their motions. 48 hours to find something, anything, that would protect his daughter and destroy the monster who'd tried to hurt her. He worked through the night. By Saturday morning, Marshall had been awake for 26 hours straight. His eyes burned as he scrolled through another database, cross-referencing property records with business licenses. Ginny was still asleep. He'd checked on her every hour, watching her small chest rise and fall, reassuring himself she was safe. Coffee had lost its effectiveness around 3 a.m. Now Marshall was running on pure determination and the methodical process that had made him good at his job. Engineering taught you to be systematic, to check every calculation, to verify every assumption. Cecil Donaldson's public face was clean. Too clean. 35 years in commercial real estate, and not a single lawsuit, not a single complaint, not even a negative review. The city council voting records showed him approving contracts, supporting developments, voting with the majority on nearly everything. But Marshall knew construction, new development. And something about Cecil's properties didn't add up. He pulled up the county assessor's database and started mapping Cecil's holdings. Commercial buildings, mostly strip malls, small office complexes, warehouse spaces. 12 properties total, all supposedly generating rental income through Donaldson Properties LLC. Marshall cross-referenced the addresses with business licenses. Only 3 of the properties showed active tenants. 9 buildings sat empty or showed occupancy that didn't match current records. Why would a successful businessman keep 9 empty properties? Marshall dug deeper. The property taxes were paid, but barely. Minimum maintenance. Several buildings had code violations that had been resolved, without actual repairs being documented. And every time a violation came before the city council, Cecil had recused himself from the vote. Technically ethical, but the violations always got dismissed or delayed. One property caught Marshall's attention, the old Hutchins warehouse where he'd found Jenny yesterday. According to records, Cecil had purchased it 8 years ago for $45,000. It was assessed as abandoned, condemned, awaiting demolition approval. But demolition required council approval. And for 8 years, the item had been tabled, delayed, pushed to next month's agenda. Cecil wanted that building to stay standing. Why? Marshall heard Jenny stirring. He saved his work and went to her room. She was sitting up, her purple jacket clutched in her hands. She'd insisted on keeping it close despite it being torn. "Hey, princess. How'd you sleep?" "Okay." Her voice was small. "Are we going back to mommy's?" Marshall sat on the edge of her bed. "Not today. You're staying with Daddy for a while." "Good." She hugged the jacket tighter. "Grandpa scares me." Something in the way she said it made Marshall's blood run cold. "Has Grandpa scared you before yesterday?" Jenny nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Can you tell Daddy about it?" He takes pictures sometimes. When we visit. Says I'm pretty like a princess. But I don't like how he looks at me." Marshall kept his voice steady even as rage threatened to choke him. "How long has Grandpa been taking pictures?" Since Mommy moved in with Grandma and Grandpa. After you and Mommy stopped living together. 6 months. Cecil had been grooming his granddaughter for 6 months, right under Jill's nose. Or maybe not under her nose at all. "Does Mommy know about the pictures?" Jenny shrugged. "Grandpa says it's our secret. Says Mommy is too busy to understand. Classic predator behavior. Secrets. Special attention. Isolation." Marshall pulled his daughter into a hug, careful not to squeeze too hard. "You did nothing wrong, baby. Nothing. And you're never going to have to keep secrets from Daddy or Mommy again. Understand?" She nodded against his chest. After breakfast, Jenny barely touched her cereal. Marshall's phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Lambert? This is Alvin Ash. I'm a Child Protective Services investigator with the county. I need to speak with you about an incident involving your daughter." Marshall's heart sank. "Who called you?" "I can't disclose that. But I need to conduct a welfare check. I can be at your residence in 30 minutes. They'd called CPS on him. Of course they had. Cecil was covering all his bases. "Fine. I'll be here." Alvin Ash arrived exactly 30 minutes later, a thin man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes that had probably seen too much. Marshall let him in, showed him Jenny was safe, fed, unharmed except for the bruises on her arm from where Cecil had grabbed her. "Can you show me those bruises again?" Ash asked gently, pulling out his phone to photograph them. Jenny held out her arm. The finger marks were clear, dark purple against her pale skin. Ash's expression didn't change, but Marshall saw his jaw tighten. "Jenny, honey, can you tell me how you got these?" "Grandpa grabbed me when I didn't want to go in the building." "Which grandpa?" "Mommy's daddy. Grandpa Cecil." Ash photographed the bruises from multiple angles, then asked Jenny to play in her room. Once she was gone, he turned to Marshall. "I need to hear your version of yesterday's events." Marshall told him everything. The gas station, following Cecil, the warehouse, the camera, the mattress, the confrontation. He didn't embellish, didn't editorialize. Just facts. Ash took notes. "You assaulted Mr. Donaldson. I stopped him from harming my daughter. Did you see him actively harming her when you entered the building?" I saw him dragging her by the hair. I saw a room set up with a camera and mattress. I'm an engineer, Mr. Ash. I know what I saw, and I know what it meant. But you didn't call the police. Marshall met his eyes. Would you have? If it was your child, and you found them in that situation? Ash was quiet for a long moment. I have to investigate all allegations. That's my job. Mr. Donaldson claims you're mentally unstable, that you attacked him without provocation. His lawyer is filing a report. Of course he is. He's also a city councilman with connections and money. I'm just a civil engineer trying to protect his daughter. The bruises on Ginny's arm are concerning, but they could have occurred when Mr. Donaldson was trying to control her during what he describes as a tantrum. She's 7 years old. She doesn't throw tantrums. Children of divorce often act out. Marshall forced himself to stay calm. Are you going to remove her from my custody? Ash closed his notebook. Not at this time, but I'll be monitoring the situation. I'll also need to interview Mrs. Lambert and Mr. Donaldson. And I'm recommending that Ginny see a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. Fine. Anything that helps her. After Ash left, Marshall returned to his computer. The CPS visit had actually given him an idea. If Cecil had been doing this for months, there might be evidence. Digital evidence. He called his cousin Tommy Sanders in Arizona. Marshall. Long time. How's? Tommy, I need help. I need to find out if someone has been creating child pornography. Silence on the line. Then, Jesus. Who? Marshall explained. Tommy listened without interrupting. Okay. First, you need to understand this is police territory. FBI territory. If you find evidence and you've tampered with it. I know. But the police won't investigate without evidence, and I can't get evidence without investigating. I'm stuck. Tommy sighed. What do you need? Cecil took a camera from the warehouse. Professional setup, tripod, and everything. If he's been doing this for months like Jenny says, he's got that footage somewhere. His house. His office. You can't break into either. That's a felony. I'm not asking you to tell me how to break in. I'm asking you how someone who is better at this than me would find the information. Another pause. Hypothetically, people like this, they're organized. They back up their files. Cloud storage, external drives, hidden folders on their computers. But they also get arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else, untouchable. So they make mistakes. They use the same passwords for everything. They store things in obvious places with obvious names. They join online communities where they think they're anonymous. Marshall's mind raced. How would someone access those communities? Marshall, don't. Whatever you're thinking. Tommy, if I don't find proof, Cecil walks. Worse, he gets to keep seeing Jenny. Maybe supervised at first, but eventually unsupervised. And then he'll be more careful. Better hidden. And I'll lose her. Tommy was quiet for a long time. There's a guy I used to work with. Does computer forensics now, corporate investigations. Rodolfo Erickson. He's in Nashville, but he consults remotely. He might be willing to look into Cecil's digital footprint. Legal adjacent, anyway. Give me his number. Marshall, be careful. You're talking about going after a city councilman. If you're wrong. I'm not wrong. I saw what I saw. Then get proof. Real, undeniable, hold up in court proof. Because anything less, and Cecil will destroy you. Marshall called Rodolfo Erickson. Explained the situation in broad strokes. Concerned father, suspected predator, need for digital forensics. Erickson listened, asked pointed questions, and finally quoted a price that made Marshall wince. Half up front, half when I deliver results. And Mr. Lambert? I find what I find. If your suspicions are wrong, you still pay. If I find evidence of a crime, I have to report it to authorities. Those are my terms. Done. When can you start? Send me Cecil Donaldson's information. I'll start with open source intelligence, social media, public databases, known associates. Then we'll see what else we can find legally. Marshall sent the information and the bank transfer. It was most of his savings, but Ginny was worth everything. His phone buzzed. Text from Samuel Dugan. Wallace Bean filed assault charges and emergency custody motion. You're due in court Monday morning 9 a.m. We need to meet tomorrow to prepare. Marshall texted back. I'll be there. Then another text, this one from Jill. You've lost your mind. Dad is pressing charges. I hope you're happy. You're going to lose everything. Marshall looked at Jenny's closed bedroom door. She was in there, safe, playing with her dolls. Innocent. Trusting him to protect her. He texted back. Ask your father why he had Jenny alone at an abandoned warehouse. Ask him why there was a camera there. Ask him why your daughter is afraid of him. No response. Marshall stood and went to his filing cabinet. Pulled out the folder labeled Divorce, Financial Records. Started going through Jill's disclosures from 6 months ago. Her income, her assets, her debts. She'd listed her residence as her parents' house. Listed Cecil as her employer. She worked as his office manager at Donaldson Properties LLC. How much did Jill know? How deep did this go? Marshall needed to find out. Because if Jill was complicit, if she'd known what her father was and had still taken Jenny to live there, he couldn't let himself think about that. Not yet. First, he needed evidence. Then he needed a plan. And then he needed to make Cecil Donaldson pay for every second of fear he'd put into his daughter's eyes. Sunday morning, Marshall met Samuel Dugan at a coffee shop across town. Samuel arrived with a briefcase and the kind of expression that said he was preparing Marshall for bad news. Cecil Donaldson filed assault charges. Criminal complaint, not just civil. You're looking at possible jail time if he pushes it. Marshall nodded. He'd expected this. The custody motion is worse. Wallace Bean is arguing that you're mentally unstable, violent, and a danger to Jenny. They want full custody awarded to Jill with supervised visitation for you. Weekly, 2 hours, professional supervisor. Based on what? Based on you attacking Cecil without provocation. Based on your paranoid delusions about Cecil harming Jenny. Based on character witnesses who'll testify you were unstable during the divorce, obsessed with work, absent from your daughter's life. That's bullshit, and you know it. I know it. But we have to prove it. Samuel pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything again. Every detail about the warehouse. Marshall walked him through it again. Samuel took notes, asked questions, circled back to specific points. The camera. You're sure you saw it? Positive. Professional setup. Not a phone or a cheap camera. This was deliberate. But Cecil took it. No evidence it was ever there. Jenny saw it too. She told the CPS investigator about Cecil taking pictures of her. Samuel's pen paused. The CPS investigator, Alvin Ash? What did he say? That he's investigating. That he'll interview Cecil and Jill. That he's recommended Jenny see a trauma specialist. That's good. That's something. Samuel made a note. But it's not enough. We need hard evidence. I'm working on that. Samuel looked up sharply. Marshall, don't do anything illegal. If you tamper with evidence, if you break any laws, you'll lose Jenny for sure. And you'll go to jail. I'm not doing anything illegal. I hired a digital forensics consultant to look into Cecil's online presence. That's borderline, but probably okay if he's using legal methods. Samuel frowned. What exactly are you hoping to find? Cecil's been grooming Jenny for 6 months. Taking pictures, making her keep secrets. That behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's more. I just need to find it. And if you do find it, then what? Then Cecil goes to prison, and Jenny is safe. Samuel leaned back in his chair. Marshall, I need to be honest with you. Even if you find evidence, even if Cecil is everything you think he is, the custody battle is separate from criminal charges. Jill could still argue she didn't know, that she's a victim too, that she should have custody. Jill works for Cecil. She lives in his house. She sees him every day. That doesn't mean she knows what he's doing, or believed it if Jenny tried to tell her. Marshall's hands clenched. Then she's either complicit or she's negligent. Either way, Jenny's not safe with her. Proving that is harder than you think, especially against Wallace Bean. He's going to argue that you're a vindictive ex-husband trying to alienate Jenny from her mother, that your accusations against Cecil are just a smokescreen. So what do I do? Samuel met his eyes. You survive Monday's hearing. Keep your cool. Don't let Wallace provoke you. Show the judge you're rational, stable, focused on Jenny's welfare. We'll argue for the status quo until the CPS investigation is complete. Joint custody, but with supervised visitation for Jill until we know more. Cecil will never allow supervised visitation at his house. Exactly. Which means Jill will have to see Jenny somewhere else. Somewhere Cecil can't access her. That buys us time. Marshall nodded slowly. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. His phone buzzed. Email from Rodolfo Erickson. Subject, initial findings. Marshall's pulse quickened. He opened the email. Mr. Lambert, preliminary search has uncovered several items of interest. Cecil Donaldson maintains multiple social media profiles under various names, several of which show concerning patterns. He's also registered on several online forums using a distinctive username pattern. More significantly, property records show he owns a storage unit facility in the next county, Riverside Self-Storage. He registered it under a different LLC, but the filing signatures match. This may be relevant to your inquiry. We'll continue investigation. More to follow. A storage facility, separate from his primary business, hidden under a different LLC. Marshall's engineering mind saw the pattern immediately. Cecil kept his properties empty not because they weren't profitable, but because he used them for something else. The warehouse where Marshall had found Jenny. Maybe others. And if he had a storage facility, he had somewhere secure to keep equipment. Evidence. Files. Marshall. Samuel was watching him. What is it? I think I know where Cecil keeps his secrets. Don't. Samuel's voice was sharp. Whatever you're thinking, don't. You can't break into a storage facility. You can't access his property without a warrant. I won't. But I can let the police know it exists. Anonymous tip. They won't get a warrant based on an anonymous tip. Not for a city councilman. They need probable cause. Marshall stared at the email. So close. Evidence that could save his daughter, but locked behind legal walls he couldn't break through. Then I need to give them probable cause. How? Marshall stood. I have to go. Jenny's with my neighbor. I need to get back to her. Marshall. I'll see you in court tomorrow morning, Samuel. And I'll be calm, rational, everything the judge needs to see. He left before Samuel could argue further. In his truck, Marshall pulled up the email again. Riverside Self-Storage. It was 30 miles away, across the county line. Remote. Private. He couldn't break in. But he could watch. He could document who came and went. And if Cecil visited, if he brought children there, that would be probable cause. Marshall drove home, relieved his neighbor's daughter who'd been watching Jenny, and spent the afternoon being dad. They made pancakes for lunch because Jenny requested them. They watched a movie. They played board games. Normal things. Safe things. But while Jenny colored at the kitchen table, Marshall's phone buzzed with another email from Rodolfo. Subject, urgent, you need to see this. Marshall opened it with Jenny safely occupied. Mr. Lambert, found something in a deleted social media account. Screenshots attached. This is beyond my scope. This needs law enforcement immediately. I've already contacted the FBI's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force as required by my licensing. They'll be in touch. I'm so sorry. Marshall opened the attachments with shaking hands. Photos. Dozens of them. Not of Jenny. Thank God, not of Jenny, but of other children. Young girls, all around Jenny's age. Posed. Inappropriate clothing. Frightened eyes. And in several photos, partially visible, Cecil's face. His distinctive Rolex watch. The interior of the Cadillac. Marshall's vision swam. He closed the files before he vomited. This was bigger than he'd thought. Cecil hadn't been grooming Jenny for his own use. He'd been preparing her to add to his collection. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Lambert? This is Special Agent Carrie Anthony with the FBI. I understand you've been investigating Cecil Donaldson. Yes. Marshall's voice came out hoarse. To protect my daughter. Your consultant forwarded evidence to us. We're going to need to speak with you and your daughter as soon as possible. And Mr. Lambert? Don't contact Cecil Donaldson. Don't warn anyone. We're opening a formal investigation, and we need the element of surprise. I have a custody hearing tomorrow morning. Cecil will be there. Silence. Then, let me talk to my superiors. We may need to expedite our timeline. Can you keep your daughter safe until tomorrow? She's not leaving my sight. Good. I'll call you back within the hour. And Mr. Lambert? You did the right thing. The evidence you helped us find, it's going to save lives. After she hung up, Marshall sat at his kitchen table, watching his daughter color. She was humming to herself, drawing a princess with a crown. Safe. For now. But tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Cecil Donaldson would face justice. Marshall just had to make sure he survived until then. Monday morning arrived with fog so thick Marshall could barely see the end of his driveway. He dressed Jenny in her favorite outfit, purple dress with flowers, the one that made her feel brave. He dressed himself in his only suit, the one he'd worn to the divorce proceedings. Special Agent Anthony had called back Sunday night. The FBI was moving fast, but not fast enough to act before the custody hearing. They needed warrants, coordination with local law enforcement, and they needed to verify all the evidence. Keep Jenny safe, Anthony had said. Get through tomorrow's hearing. We'll handle Cecil Donaldson. Marshall had wanted to argue, wanted the FBI to arrest Cecil immediately. But Anthony explained they needed to do this right. If they moved too fast and evidence was compromised, Cecil could walk on technicalities. Now, driving to the courthouse with Jenny in the back seat, Marshall's hands were steady on the wheel. He'd been up most of the night preparing, but he felt oddly calm. He knew what Cecil was. He knew justice was coming. He just had to get through the next few hours. The courthouse parking lot was half empty this early. Marshall parked, got Jenny out, and walked toward the family court entrance. Samuel Dugan was waiting outside, briefcase in hand. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." "Remember, stay calm. Don't let Wallace provoke you. Answer questions directly and honestly. And Marshall, don't mention the FBI. That's not relevant to today's proceeding, and it could complicate their investigation." They went through security. Jenny held Marshall's hand tightly as they walked down the hallway to Judge Carmen Love's courtroom. Marshall had appeared before Love during the divorce. She was fair, but no nonsense, not easily swayed by emotion or dramatics. Outside the courtroom, Jill stood with her parents and Wallace Bean. Cecil looked perfectly composed in an expensive suit, a bandage on his temple from where Marshall had slammed him into the wall. He was talking to Jill, his hand on her shoulder, every inch the concerned father. When Cecil saw Marshall, his eyes went cold, but his expression remained pleasant, almost pitying. Jill saw Jenny and started forward. "Baby." Jenny pressed against Marshall's leg. "Mrs. Lambert," Samuel stepped between them. "Until the judge rules, we're maintaining the current custody arrangement. She's my daughter, and we'll let Judge Love decide the next steps." Wallace Bean smiled. He was a tall man, mid-60s, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from winning most of his cases. "Samuel, always a pleasure. Though I think we both know how this is going to end." "Do we?" "Your client assaulted a city councilman based on paranoid delusions. He's unstable and dangerous. Judge Love will see that." Before Samuel could respond, the bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "Lambert versus Lambert custody modification. All parties please enter." They filed in. Marshall sat at one table with Samuel, Jenny between them. Jill sat at the other table with Wallace, Cecil, and Jean Donaldson in the row behind them. Judge Love entered. Everyone stood, then sat. "This is a hearing on an emergency motion for modification of custody in the matter of Lambert versus Lambert. Mr. Bean, you filed the motion. Present your case." Wallace stood. He was eloquent, persuasive, painting a picture of a devoted mother and grandfather torn apart by a violent, unstable father. He called Cecil to the stand first. Cecil told his story smoothly. He'd taken Jenny to see the old warehouse where he'd worked in the 1980s, a nostalgic trip to show her where Grandpa used to earn his living. Jenny had been scared of the dark building, thrown a tantrum. Cecil had been trying to calm her down when Marshall appeared and attacked him without warning. "I tried to reason with him," Cecil said, touching the bandage on his head. "Tried to tell him it was just a misunderstanding. But he was in a rage. Completely irrational. I feared for my life, Your Honor, and I feared what he might do to his own daughter if he's capable of such violence." Wallace entered photographs of Cecil's injuries into evidence. Bruised ribs, the cut on his head, swollen jaw. "Mr. Donaldson, has Marshall Lambert ever exhibited this kind of violence before?" "Not to this degree. But during the divorce, my daughter Jill mentioned he had anger issues. Punched a wall once during an argument. Threw things." Marshall's jaw clenched. "That was a lie. He'd never." Samuel put a hand on his arm. "Stay calm." Wallace continued. "And in your professional opinion, having observed Marshall Lambert over the years of his marriage to your daughter, would you say he's mentally stable?" "Objection." Samuel stood. "Mr. Donaldson isn't qualified to assess mental stability." Sustained, Judge Love said. "Mr. Bean, stick to facts, not opinions." Wallace smiled. "Of course, Your Honor." "Mr. Donaldson, no further questions." Samuel stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Donaldson, you said you took Jenny to the warehouse to show her where you used to work. What years did you work there?" Cecil didn't hesitate. 1982 to 1986. "And the warehouse has been abandoned since 2009, correct?" "Yes." "So for nearly 40 years, you never mentioned this place to your granddaughter. Never showed her during all the years she was growing up. But suddenly, on a Friday afternoon, you decided it was important." "I was feeling nostalgic." "Is that a crime?" "What were you feeling nostalgic about?" "The textile mill closed 35 years ago. The place where I worked hard to support my family. Samuel pulled out a document. Property records show you purchased the warehouse 8 years ago for $45,000. Why would you buy a condemned building you allegedly have nostalgic attachment to? Cecil's expression didn't change. Investment property. I intended to redevelop it. In 8 years, you haven't redeveloped it. You haven't done anything with it except pay minimum taxes and fight demolition orders. The market hasn't been right. Or you wanted to keep it empty. Samuel let that hang. Mr. Donaldson, when Child Protective Services investigator Alvin Ash interviewed Jenny, she told him you've been taking pictures of her for months. Is that true? Wallace shot to his feet. Objection. Hearsay and irrelevant to this custody proceeding. Your Honor, Samuel said, Mr. Donaldson's behavior toward the child is directly relevant to custody and visitation. Judge Love looked at Cecil. Mr. Donaldson, have you been taking photographs of your granddaughter? Cecil nodded smoothly. Of course. She's my granddaughter. I have pictures of her at Christmas, birthdays, family dinners. What grandfather doesn't take pictures? That's not what Jenny described, Samuel said. She told Mr. Ash you took pictures of her that made her uncomfortable. That you told her it was a secret. Your Honor, Wallace interjected. A 7-year-old child's interpretation of innocent family photos is hardly evidence of wrongdoing. Judge Love frowned. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Dugan. Samuel pressed on. Mr. Donaldson, did you have a camera with you at the warehouse? No. Mr. Lambert stated he saw a camera on a tripod in a room at the warehouse. Mr. Lambert was mistaken or lying. Did you remove any equipment from the warehouse after the incident? Cecil's pause was barely perceptible. No, nothing at all. The building is abandoned, Mr. Dugan. There's nothing there to remove. Samuel sat down. Marshall knew what he was doing, planting seeds of doubt, without making accusations they couldn't prove yet. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Wallace called Jill next. She testified about Marshall's work schedule, his absences, his supposed anger. She painted herself as the stable parent, supported by her loving family. Mrs. Lambert, Samuel said during cross-examination, you work for your father's company, correct? Yes. I'm his office manager. You live in your parents' house? Yes. They've been very supportive during the divorce. How often does Jenny see your father? Every day? Dad's wonderful with her. Has Jenny ever expressed fear of your father? Jill hesitated. Children go through phases. She's been clingy lately, but that's normal after a divorce. Has she told you she's afraid of him? She said she doesn't like when Dad takes pictures, but he's just trying to preserve memories. Did you think it was strange that your father took your daughter to an abandoned warehouse? He was showing her family history. I didn't think anything of it. Samuel paused. Mrs. Lambert, if you discovered your father had harmed your daughter, what would you do? Jill's face paled. He would never. Please answer the question. I would protect my daughter. Of course I would. Then why haven't you asked your father why Jenny has bruises on her arm from where he grabbed her? Jill looked at Cecil. Marshall saw something pass between them, some unspoken communication. Dad said she was fighting him during her tantrum. He had to restrain her for her own safety. Samuel sat down. Judge Love called for a recess. Marshall stood, his legs shaky. Jenny looked up at him with worried eyes. It's okay, Princess. Just a little while longer. In the hallway, Samuel pulled Marshall aside. It's not going well. Cecil's good. He's prepared. And Jill's backing him up. She knows, Marshall said quietly. Did you see her look at him? She knows what he is. We can't prove that. And Judge Love isn't going to separate a mother from her child based on suspicions. Marshall's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is S.A. Anthony. We have warrants. Executing search of Donaldson residence and storage facility in 30 minutes. Keep Cecil in that courtroom. Marshall showed Samuel. Jesus, Samuel breathed. Okay. We need to stall. Can you testify? Will it help? It'll eat up time. They went back into the courtroom. Samuel called Marshall to the stand. Marshall testified about what he'd seen at the warehouse, about Jenny's fear, about the bruises. Wallace tore into him on cross-examination, painting him as paranoid, violent, delusional. Mr. Lambert, you attacked my client based entirely on your own interpretation of the situation, correct? I attacked him because I saw my daughter in danger. A danger you assumed. A camera you assumed belonged to Mr. Donaldson. Equipment you assumed was there for nefarious purposes. I know what I saw. You know what you think you saw. But you didn't call police. You didn't seek help. You immediately resorted to violence. That's the action of an unstable man, isn't it? Marshall forced himself to stay calm. I protected my daughter. I'd do it again. Wallace smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Love looked at her watch. It was 11:30. I'm going to take this matter under advisement. I'll issue a ruling by end of business today. In the meantime, the current custody arrangement stands. Mr. Lambert maintains physical custody. Mrs. Lambert has supervised visitation pending my decision. Cecil's face darkened. Wallace leaned over to speak to him, but Cecil shook his head. They stood as Judge Love left the bench. Marshall held Jenny's hand, waiting for the courtroom to clear. Cecil approached. This isn't over, Marshall. No, it's not. I'll have my granddaughter back, and you'll be in jail where you belong. Marshall met his eyes. We'll see. Cecil smiled, that cold, calculating smile. Yes, we will. He turned and walked out with Jill and Jean, Wallace following. Samuel gripped Marshall's shoulder. You did good. Stayed calm. Marshall's phone buzzed again. Search in progress. We'll update soon. 30 minutes later, as Marshall was driving Jenny home, his phone rang. Mr. Lambert? Special Agent Anthony. We found it. The storage facility had a unit registered under a fake name, but the signatures matched Cecil Donaldson. Inside we found cameras, computers, hard drives, years of material. Mr. Lambert, we found evidence of at least 40 victims. Marshall had to pull over. His hands were shaking. There's more, Anthony continued. We found communications with other offenders. A network. This is bigger than one man. Cecil Donaldson was part of an organized operation. We're making arrests across 3 states. Is Jenny? We haven't found any material featuring your daughter. It appears you interrupted him before he could act. You saved her, Mr. Lambert. And by doing so, you saved a lot of other children too. Marshall closed his eyes. What happens now? Federal marshals are en route to arrest Cecil Donaldson. He'll be charged with production and distribution of child sexual abuse material, multiple counts. He's looking at life in prison. And Mr. Lambert? Your custody situation will likely resolve itself. Once Mrs. Lambert understands what her father is, she may choose to cooperate. After Anthony hung up, Marshall sat in his truck, engine running, Jenny singing to herself in the back seat. It was over. Cecil would pay, but Marshall's revenge wouldn't end with an arrest. He had plans that would ensure Cecil Donaldson suffered every day for the rest of his miserable life. The federal marshals arrested Cecil Donaldson in the courthouse parking lot at 2 p.m. Marshall watched from his truck as they put the city councilman in handcuffs, read him his rights, and loaded him into an unmarked car. Cecil's face was purple with rage, his composure finally shattered. Jill stood frozen on the sidewalk, her mother Jean sobbing beside her. Wallace Bean was on his phone, already working damage control, but his expression said he knew this case was unwinnable. Marshall's phone rang. Samuel Dugan. Marshall, I just heard. The FBI arrested Cecil. What the hell is going on? Justice, Marshall said simply. I'm getting calls from reporters. This is going to be huge. Cecil Donaldson, city councilman, arrested on federal child pornography charges. Marshall, you need to prepare for media attention. I don't care about media attention. I care about Jenny. Judge Love's clerk called. She's issuing an emergency ruling. Full custody to you pending the criminal investigation. Jill can have supervised visitation, but not at the Donaldson residence, and Cecil is barred from any contact with Jenny. Marshall felt something loosen in his chest. Good. There's more. Alvin Ash from CPS wants to talk to you. And Special Agent Anthony wants to coordinate a forensic interview with Jenny. They need her testimony about the photos Cecil took. I'll cooperate with whatever they need. After he hung up, Marshall got out of his truck and walked over to where Jill stood. She saw him coming and her face crumpled. Marshall, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he was doing. Marshall wanted to believe her. Wanted to think his ex-wife was ignorant rather than complicit. But he'd seen the way she looked at Cecil in court, the way she defended him. Jenny told me Cecil had been taking pictures for 6 months. You never noticed? Jill's eyes filled with tears. He said they were just family photos. I thought I didn't think. You didn't want to think. Because thinking about it meant facing what your father is. I love my daughter. Then why did you let her live in a house with a predator? Marshall's voice was hard. You worked for him. You saw him every day. And Ginny tried to tell you, didn't she? She said she didn't like the photos. That Cecil scared her. Jill was sobbing now. I thought she was acting out because of the divorce. You thought it was easier to blame me than question your father. Jean Donaldson grabbed Marshall's arm. How dare you? Cecil is innocent. This is all you're doing. You poisoned that child against him. Marshall shook her off. The FBI found 40 victims, Jean. 40 children. Your husband is a monster, and you're either blind or you've been covering for him. Jean slapped him, hard enough that his head snapped to the side. Security. Wallace being called out. Someone get security. Marshall didn't react. Just looked at Jean with cold contempt. You'll have to live with what he did. Every one of those children, that's on both of you. He walked back to his truck, got in, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, he saw Jill collapse on her mother, both of them crying. He didn't feel sorry for them. At home, Marshall sat Ginny down and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that Grandpa Cecil had done bad things and wouldn't be around anymore. Ginny nodded, seeming relieved more than upset. Is Mommy mad at me? No, baby. Mommy's sad about Grandpa, but she's not mad at you. None of this is your fault. Okay. Ginny went back to her coloring book, resilient in the way children sometimes were. Marshall's phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, colleagues, family members who'd heard the news. He ignored most of them, answered only the calls that mattered. Samuel, Special Agent Anthony, Alvin Ash. The forensic interview was scheduled for Wednesday. Marshall would be there to support Ginny through it. But Monday night, after Ginny was asleep, Marshall sat in his home office and opened his laptop. He'd been planning this part for days, waiting for the right moment. Cecil Donaldson was arrested. He'd face trial, probably plead guilty to avoid more charges, spend the rest of his life in federal prison. But prison was too easy, too clean. Marshall had other plans. He opened an encrypted email account he'd set up days ago. Started typing. The first email went to every city council member. Subject line, Cecil Donaldson's legacy. Body text, a detailed accounting of every property Cecil owned, every contract he'd approved, every vote he'd cast in his 12 years on the council. Marshall highlighted the empty warehouses, the delayed demolitions, the code violations that mysteriously vanished. He didn't directly accuse corruption, just laid out the facts and let them draw their own conclusions. The second email went to the local newspaper's investigative reporter, Carmen Love's husband Saul Aldrich. Subject line, Donaldson Properties, a deeper look. Marshall attached property records, tax filings, and a timeline showing when Cecil bought each property and how he'd used them. The reporter would do his own investigation, but Marshall gave him the roadmap. The third email went to every tenant who'd ever rented from Donaldson Properties. Subject line, you deserve to know. Marshall told them their landlord was a federal prisoner, suggested they might want to explore legal options regarding their leases, reminded them that property management by a convicted felon was questionable at best. Within hours, Cecil's business empire began crumbling. By Tuesday morning, the city council had called an emergency meeting to review all contracts Cecil had touched. 3 major tenants had filed to break their leases. The newspaper ran a front-page story about Cecil's properties and their potential connection to his crimes. Marshall watched it unfold with cold satisfaction. But he wasn't done. Wednesday, while Ginny gave her statement to FBI forensic interviewers, with Marshall outside the room providing support between sessions, Marshall made phone calls. To every church member at First Baptist where Cecil was a deacon. To every business partner. To every friend and associate. He didn't make accusations. He just asked questions. Did you know Cecil owned that abandoned warehouse? Did you ever wonder why he kept it empty? Did you notice how Cecil always voted to dismiss code violations on his properties? Were you aware of the storage facility Cecil owned under a fake name? Seeds of doubt. Whispers. Rumors that would grow and spread. By Thursday, First Baptist Pastoral Council had removed Cecil as deacon and issued a statement condemning his actions. 3 business partners had dissolved their partnerships with Donaldson Properties. The mayor called for a full investigation into every city contract Cecil had been involved with. Cecil's reputation was destroyed. His business was failing. His standing in the community was obliterated. And Marshall had done it all legally. No breaking and entering. No violence. Just information, strategically deployed. On Friday, Special Agent Anthony called with an update. Cecil Donaldson's lawyer contacted us. He wants to make a deal, plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentencing recommendation of 25 years instead of life. Will you take it? Marshall asked. Probably. The evidence is overwhelming, and a plea deal saves the victims from having to testify in open court, including your daughter. What about the others in his network? We've made 14 arrests so far. More coming. Mr. Donaldson is cooperating, giving us names and locations. He's trying to reduce his sentence. Marshall smiled grimly. Cecil, always the deal maker. Always looking for the angle that benefited him. There's something else, Anthony said. We found financial records. Cecil was being paid. This wasn't just personal gratification. He was producing material for profit. Significant profit. Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency, the works. How much? Over $3 million across 8 years. Marshall's jaw clenched. What happens to that money? Federal seizure. It'll go to victim compensation funds. Good. But Marshall had another idea. He called Samuel Dugan. I want to sue Cecil Donaldson's estate. Civil suit. Emotional damages to Jenny. Marshall, he's going to prison. He'll have nothing left. He has $3 million in offshore accounts. I want every penny. And I want it to go into a trust fund for Jenny and for the other victims. Samuel was quiet. That's actually not a bad idea. We can argue that Cecil's criminal activities directly harmed Jenny, caused emotional trauma, and seek damages. With his guilty plea as evidence, it's almost a guaranteed win. Do it. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, interviews, and media attention. Marshall kept Jenny as sheltered as possible, but she saw the news reports, heard the whispers at school. The forensic psychologist working with Jenny said she was remarkably resilient, but would need ongoing therapy. Marshall scheduled sessions twice a week. Jill requested visitation. Marshall agreed, but only supervised and only after Jill completed a course of therapy herself. She'd moved out of her parents' house, gotten her own apartment, and filed for divorce from her complicity in Cecil's business. She claimed she truly hadn't known, and the FBI's investigation seemed to support that. They found no evidence Jill was aware of Cecil's crimes. Marshall wasn't sure he believed it, but for Jenny's sake, he allowed the supervised visits. Jean Donaldson was a different story. The FBI investigation revealed she'd discovered evidence of Cecil's activities 5 years ago, child pornography on his computer, and had chosen to delete it rather than report it. She was arrested as an accessory, though she claimed she'd been afraid of Cecil, afraid of what he'd do if she turned him in. The courts didn't buy it. She pled guilty to obstruction of justice and received 10 years. Marshall felt no sympathy. Cecil's trial was brief. He pled guilty to 47 counts of production and distribution of child sexual abuse material. The judge sentenced him to 45 years in federal prison. He'd be 94 when released, if he survived that long. But Marshall's revenge wasn't finished. The civil suit Samuel filed moved quickly. With Cecil's guilty plea and the seized financial records, the judge ruled in Marshall's favor. $3 million in damages, to be placed in a trust fund divided equally among all confirmed victims. Jenny's share would be held until she turned 18, managed by Marshall and an independent trustee. But Marshall had one more move to make. He visited Cecil in federal prison 3 months after the arrest. Cecil looked different. No expensive suit. No Rolex watch. Prison orange and handcuffs. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and hollow. They sat across from each other in the visiting room, a guard standing nearby. "Why are you here?" Cecil asked. His voice was dull, lifeless. "To make sure you understand," Marshall said. "Understand what?" "Every day for the rest of your life, you'll wake up in a cell. You'll eat prison food. You'll follow orders from guards young enough to be your grandchildren. You'll never be respected again. Never be feared again. You're nothing now." Cecil's face twisted. "I know what I am. You don't need to tell me." "I'm not done," Marshall continued. "Your properties? Seized. Your business? Destroyed. Your reputation? Gone. Everyone who ever knew you now knows what you are. Your church has denounced you. Your friends have abandoned you. Your wife is in prison because of you. What do you want, Marshall? An apology? No. I want you to know that Jenny is safe. She's happy. She's healing. And she'll grow up knowing you'll never hurt her again. She'll grow up with that $3 million you earned selling children's suffering. She'll use it for college, for her future, for her dreams. Every good thing in her life, from now on, comes from your destruction." Cecil's hands shook. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than me. I am better than you. And that's what you'll think about every day in here. How you lost. How I won. How your granddaughter is living her best life while you rot. Marshall stood. That's all I came to say. Enjoy the next 45 years, Cecil. I know I will. He walked out without looking back. 1 year later, Marshall stood in his backyard watching Jenny on her new swing set. She was laughing, her hair flying as she pumped her legs, trying to go higher. She'd made progress in therapy. Still had nightmares occasionally, but they were getting less frequent. She talked about her feelings now, didn't keep secrets, knew she was safe. Jill had completed her court-mandated therapy and had graduated to unsupervised weekend visits. She'd found a new job, built a new life separate from her father's shadow. She and Marshall weren't friends, probably never would be, but they were effective co-parents. Marshall had been promoted at work. The publicity around Cecil's case had somehow enhanced his reputation as a father who'd do anything to protect his child. He'd gotten offers from other firms, bigger projects, more money. He'd turned most of them down. Time with Jenny mattered more than career advancement. His phone rang. Rodolfo Erickson, the forensic investigator. Mr. Lambert. Wanted to give you an update. The FBI's investigation into Cecil's network has resulted in 48 arrests across 6 states. They've identified over 200 victims and are working on reunification and support services. That's good. It's more than good. What you did, stopping to investigate, refusing to let it go, you saved lives. Literally saved lives. Marshall watched Jenny swing. I just protected my daughter. You did more than that. The FBI said your evidence and documentation broke the case open. Without you, Cecil might still be operating. After Erickson hung up, Marshall sat on his back porch and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Not happiness. What had happened was too dark for happiness. But satisfaction that justice had been served. Cecil Donaldson would spend the rest of his life in prison, surrounded by criminals who reserved special hatred for child predators. His reputation was destroyed. His wealth was seized. His family was shattered. His legacy was horror and shame. And Jenny was safe. That was all that mattered. Marshall called for his daughter. Jenny, time for dinner. She jumped off the swing mid-arc, landed in the grass, and came running toward him with a bright smile. Can we have tacos? We can have whatever you want, princess. She hugged him tight, and Marshall hugged her back, grateful for every moment, every day, every second he had with his little girl. He'd won. Not just the custody battle. Not just the legal fight. He'd won the war. And Cecil Donaldson had lost everything. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.